Sup YouTube, but we're coming back at you with another production recreation, another Def Leppard production recreation. You know, some of you have probably seen, I did a recreation a while back of Hysteria, and you know, I didn't have another Def Leppard one in the works or in the plans, but what happened was somebody had commented on the Hysteria video alerting me to this contest that Sweetwater was doing. Sweetwater was doing this Def Leppard cover song contest, and after I looked into it, what it was a celebration of the album Pyromania. So they were looking for entries of songs off of that album. And so I thought about it for a little while, and I was kind of blowing it off because I had other things to work on. And then about a week before, I was like, you know what? I probably ought to start on that if I'm going to do that. So that's how quickly this thing had to come together. I kind of, unfortunately, waited until the very last minute and then had to kind of rush and do it very quickly. And to make it worse, what happened was I had done the music, and then the singer I had lined up had come down with a cold. And he was like, oh, man, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it this week. I was like, well, I don't really have an option. It's got to be done this week. So I reached out to another friend of mine who I thought could do it, and same thing. He was like, man, I am so sick right now. I cannot sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I was like, I just couldn't believe all these people were sick. And then so finally, I remembered this guy, Chris Payne from the UK, who I met several years ago. I had posted a video, one of my songs online, and he came across it and really liked it and reached out, and we connected. And we've kind of talked off and on for years now just about working together on something. But it's kind of tough, you know, being so far apart. So it's just never happened. But finally, I was like, you know what? I guess maybe I'll see if he wants to work on this. And of course, he was totally down. So in the midnight hour, you know, I had finished up the music. This was probably about Monday or Tuesday, and it was due Friday. Sent the track to him. He cut the vocals, flew them back to me. Then I had to do the mix and do the video and all that stuff. So that gives you kind of an idea of how quickly all this stuff had to come together. But fortunately, he did such a good job. I had no critiques. As soon as I imported the vocals, I was like, yeah, that'll totally work. And, you know, I think the fact that I had done Hysteria before is probably the only reason I was able to pull this off as quickly as I was. A lot of the techniques we'll look at in here are things I covered in the Hysteria video, so I'll kind of brush over some of those things in this video just because I don't want to be repeating myself all the time. But yeah, had I not done Hysteria already, I don't think I could have pulled this off because there's just some of the things that, you know, it took me a long time to figure out on the first Def Leppard one I did, so that I already knew on this one. So anyway.
You're the only one I wanna
real quick, I got to do a couple plugs. If you want to download the multi-track stems from this session, there's a download link down below in the description. You can download the stems. And then also, if you want to support what I'm doing, these videos, I love making them, but they do take a lot of time, and I really have no way to monetize them. So if you want to support what I'm doing, you want to help me keep doing these videos, there's a PayPal donation link in the description down below. That'll really go a long way to helping me out. And then also, if you're a band or you're an artist or you're a songwriter looking for help with your productions, with your records, send me a message through my website. I'd love to be a part of your project. Okay, cool. So let's just take a look at the drums. So the main difference between this and Hysteria is that Hysteria was totally programmed. Well, it was actually programmed with live cymbals, if you remember that from my video. But this record is definitely a live drum take, and you can kind of tell just by listening to it, but also because the tempo kind of slightly fluctuates throughout, which, happens with live drummers, but wouldn't happen if it was programmed with a drum machine. So that's what I did. I cut live drums, and first thing we should look at is this really cool intro. And it's super simple, really. All this is they take the snare drum and you print it. I printed mine through a bunch of reverb, and then I reversed it. So like in Pro Tools, you can kind of I could do it right here. I could just click this, go to Other, Reverse, and then you hit Render. And so basically what you do is that you take that sample that you got of the snare drum reversed, and you place it so that it swells right up into each snare drum hit. So on its own, the reverse kind of sounds like this. And it's kind of swelling into the actual snare drum hit itself. It's a pretty common effect, but I just remember, when I was like a little kid, hearing this record and being like, wow, what is that? That's probably the first time I really had recognized and like heard a reverse snare drum and was like, how did they do that? That's amazing, And of course in the DAW, it's super simple. I know back then would have been a little bit trickier. They had different ways of doing that. You could record it to tape, and then you could flip the reel of tape over and then play it, and it would be in reverse. Or by this time, they may have had a digital way of doing that. I know that certain, like the AMS RMX16 and like certain reverbs could do this. You could hit a snare drum and then it would play it back in reverse. So I don't know exactly how they did it, but that's how you do it nowadays. Let's just go ahead and take a listen to the drums a little bit, and then I'll talk about, my setup and... Basically, this would have been my Yamaha kit set up with, I think, a stereo pair of overheads, kick drum mic, snare drum mic. I don't think I even bothered with a snare bottom mic this time, and then some tom mics. I kind of went into this knowing that I was going to mostly replace my drums with samples anyway, or at least kind of like drastically enhance them with samples. So just wanted kind of a good clean capture of the kick and the snare and the toms, and then some good sounding cymbals and hi-hats, because that part wasn't going to be replaced, My kick drums, you can see right here, they're both just samples, so I didn't end up even using any of the live kick mic in this particular mix. And this first sample, I believe, was the same exact sample that I made for Hysteria. So if you watch my Hysteria video, I mentioned in a video that you can download the stems, or you can download the drum samples, and I literally took that kick drum sample, and that was the first thing I went to. I was like, well, that ought to work, and that sounds like this. It's a really good, really punchy kind of kick drum sound. I did end up reaching for another sample. This is another sample that I have that I go to quite a bit whenever I want to get a really nice kind of like, punch that's not clicky. It's more in the mid-range. So together those sound kind of like this. I'll take this one out, then I'll put it in so we can hear what that's bringing to it. So that's the kick drum. And then this mic right here, this is actually my live snare drum mic. So that's our live snare drum, and then let's check out these samples we got. Okay, so that's what our snare drum sounds like with our 2 samples. And then I got a couple of parallel buses here that are doing different things. One of them is this fat bus that you guys have seen me use before. Basically, I just make a parallel bus. I put this SSL channel strip on there. I turn up 200 hertz all the way. Follow it with a little bit of distortion, a little bit of saturation. It sounds like this. It's just this kind of thuddy, low thing that I can blend in to taste with the live drums. And that sounds kind of like this. Kind of just gives us a little bit more heft to the low end of the drum. And then another thing I was needing on the snare drum sound was a little bit more sustain, a little bit more ring and stuff. So a lot of times what can work well for that is something like this, 1176 compressor. So basically I made a parallel bus right here. It's all buttons in on this compressor, so it sounds kind of like this. We're smashing it really hard, but mixed in with the snare drum, that kind of sounds like this. Yeah, it's just giving us a little bit more length, a little bit more energy, So that's what that's doing for us. And then there's some effects. So we've got this reverb over here that is a gated reverb. So I'm using this Valhalla Vintage Verb. I got this large gated snare preset. There's quite a few nice gated reverb presets on here that are good for this sort of thing, but and then I had another reverb that was my Lexicon PCM60 on a plate setting. And this is the kind of thing that I was doing just to match the record a little bit more. It reminds me of the same reverb that's on the snare drum for Back in Black by AC/DC. There's this kind of bright, tinny reverb. It's actually not my favorite part of that drum mix, but it is something I did just to kind of match the record a little bit more. And so that's pretty much most of the drum stuff. The toms were a similar kind of thing. I blended in a couple different samples with the rack tom and with the floor tom. And I eventually printed it down to just a stereo track, so I can't show you guys those original stems for the toms because they're just on the stereo track now. But that's pretty much the drum mix. Let's listen to the whole drum mix one more time. Okay, cool. Let's go take a look at the guitars. So a lot of cool guitar stuff happening in this song. And, I think one of the things that became really important for really getting the right sound was all the different layers, because there's really only a couple of riffs happening at any point in time. But for the actual sound of those riffs, I found myself having to do quite a few layers, quite a few more than I usually would do to really achieve that kind of Def Leppard-y sound. The Def Leppard sound to me really is this kind of almost symphonic quality. It's like a symphonic representation of a rock band. And to achieve that, it really can't just be drums, bass, and then 2 guitars like it is live. It really takes quite a bit of layering to achieve that massive kind of quality, arena kind of quality. So at the intro, we've got this main riff. And so this right here, this is a stereo track that is actually a print of several guitar tracks because I printed it through a stereo EQ. So basically, let me just go ahead and open up the guitar tracks that I was using originally. So this main riff is actually made up of 4 passes. So I played it through 4 times, just the same exact riff. And these first couple of times, I was using a combination of 2 guitar amps. So I had my Marshall Silver Jubilee, and then I was also running the Galen Kruger, which is the little amp I actually talked about in the Hysteria video. It's this little amp that's, basically like a Rockman X100 with speakers. So what we've got here, this is what the Marshall sounded like. And this is what the Galen Kruger sounded like. And so that's me literally just putting an SM57 right on the speakers of that little tiny cabinet. It has these little like 6-inch speakers. And together it sounds kind of like this. So you can tell how much that Galen Kruger is really giving us that really cool punched mid sound, that kind of cocked wah kind of sound, which is really important because the Marshall by itself is a little bit more scooped, a little bit more of a conventional kind of rock tone. So that's what we've got. I played it through 2 times with that same amp configuration. And, it sounds good, but it's just not quite thick enough yet. And so I ended up doing a couple more passes. This time I used a different amp that I have. And already that's starting to sound a little bit more like kind of a chorus of guitars, in a cool way. And then another really important thing was the effects. So it's got a pretty heavy reverb, and then also a little bit of the Eventide H3000 for like a harmonizer. So that's 4 tracks of guitar with effects, and then you can see up here, I had a hardware EQ on it that I printed it through. So this is the final track that we end up hearing in the track. This is all 4 of these guitars grouped together and then EQ'd. And basically I was using the outboard EQ just to kind of give us a lot more bite and top, which is really important, especially in the track. So the next kind of cool thing happens is that after that main intro riff, when the drums kick in, there's another set of guitars that come in right here. And what that is that's 2 more parts playing that main riff, but actually slightly modified, which I'll talk about in a second. And then these are hard pan left and right. So it's almost the same riff, except I'm holding on that first chord extra long. So it's like ba-na, ba-na-na-na-na, na-na-na-na-na. And what that does is that at the end of that riff, it kind of adds this cool little bit of rub, with the way that I'm holding on to that one note extra long while the main riff is going back down. So together it sounds kind of like this. And so cool, we got the main riff, which kind of carries all the way through the verse until we get halfway through the verse where these rhythm guitars come in. So like I was talking about earlier, how, that main riff is kind of mostly down the center. I am panning it out a little bit just so it's not super narrow. It has just a little bit more width. But it's important that it stays down the middle so that whenever these rhythm guitars come in, hard pan left and right, it's a really explosive, kind of big dynamic in this verse. I wanna touch. I see your face every time I dream. And so that makes for a really nice dynamic halfway through that verse. It gets super big and super wide. So one of the things I love so much about Mutt and a lot of his records is the very intentional use of panning. So, like for instance, with this rhythm guitar part being so wide in that verse, that creates an issue for us because a lot of times, we want the chorus to be the biggest, the widest, most climactic part of the song. So what do you do in a situation like this where, during the verse, we've already kind of gone to that biggest dynamic? Well, what he did, which I thought was kind of cool, is that when we go to this pre-chorus, there's a big change in the panning of the guitars. And see if you can pick up on what I'm talking about. Oh, look what you've done to this rock and roll clown. So basically we go from this super wide left and right guitar sound to it being just in the right speaker. And then what they did in the left speaker to kind of fill it out is they put the keyboard part over there. Which is really cool because now when we go back into the chorus right after this, the guitars go wide again, left and right, and it still feels very climactic. It still feels like a very big dynamic shift. You know, even though we were already really wide in the verses, by breaking it up so much during this pre-chorus, you know, it allows us to still go wide again in the chorus, and it still feels like this big climactic moment. Okay, and on that note, so moving on to the chorus, so we have this main distorted electric guitar that's kind of just doubling what the bass is playing an octave higher. And as you can tell, that's double tracked and pan left and right. And then we've got these clean electrics that sound kind of like this. And so, you know, if you saw my Hysteria video, this is pretty much the exact same guitar tone that I got on that song. And basically it was that Galen Kruger amp, the same one we heard earlier on the main riff. You know, it has a really nice clean setting on it. That's very much kind of like a Rockman X100. And I use that, and a lot of times I'll record that in combination with just a straight DI from the guitar, which allows me to kind of, you know, play with the balance of those two signals and everything like that. And then for that clean guitar part, what I did is I played it 4 times, and I just kind of had this funny idea. You know, I was playing a Strat, and I was thinking, you know, what would happen if I just played it through 4 or 5 times, and I used a different pickup selection each time. And so that's what I did. And I don't remember exactly, you know, which of these tracks are which position on the guitar, but we can just kind of listen to what each take sounds like. And then there's another take here. And then another one here. And then a 4th one right here. And then all together it sounds kind of like this. So then from there, it looks like, again, I used an outboard EQ to kind of just brighten things up a little bit, which sounds kind of like this. Another thing I remember doing from there, which was really important, was I needed quite a bit more of a mid-range kind of nasally quality to make it come out in the mix the way it needs to. And what ended up working really well for that was I reamped this stereo guitar track out through a couple of pedals. I think I was using like the Boss GE7 EQ into a distortion pedal or something, but it sounds kind of like this. You know, it's kind of awful sounding by itself, but blended in with the regular track, it really goes a long way to making it kind of speak in the mix. Like real quick, let's just check that out in the track, and I'll mute this and turn it on so we can hear how big of a difference it makes, and it's in the actual mix. Yeah, so, you know, I mean, it's basically the difference between being able to hear it and not being able to hear it is that mid-range push. You know, it's really important in the mix. So, and then I had a bunch of just delays and reverbs to go along with it. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the lead guitar stuff. Okay, cool. So that part would have been double tracked. which is a really big part of that sound, that Def Leppard-y sound, is just playing that part twice. And then another big part of it is the reverb. So a lot of reverb on these guitar solos, I noticed. Just really gives it that arena, that big stadium kind of sound. And then let's check out the guitar solo. It's a really great guitar solo, played by Phil Collen. And of course, those kind of things, these are the kind of things that you kind of have to do a lot of times sometimes to really make sure, the harmonics and everything are just the way you want them. And this is another thing that has to be done with a loud amp in the room, to kind of get those harmonics to come out. And, that's one of the things that I remember in an interview. I saw an interview with Dan Huff, and he was talking about one of the things he really picked up on with Mutt was, just how many times you need to do a part sometimes until you really land on that magic take. He was talking about, in this one interview, a Rascal Flatts record he had produced where there's this outro part and the steel guitar has these couple little lines on the outro, and the guy interviewing him was like, man, that just sounds so good. And he was like, yeah, I remember we did that. We must have done that maybe 50 times, he said. And he did the same lick all 50 times. He wasn't trying different stuff every time. He said, we were just doing it over and over until everything happened just exactly the way it needed to, because with guitars in particular, there's so many harmonics and different things that can happen kind of by accident that sometimes it's worth just redoing it even the same way until you kind of end up with a take that has that magic to it, has the magical amount of overtones and things that kind of come out. And that's kind of, how these things come about sometimes, is that you just have to replay it until everything just kind of happens in a really magical way. And then there's another one on the outro that's really great. And there's so much reverb on that. That's way more reverb than I've ever used in any normal context for a guitar solo. But it is what I heard on the original record, and it does have a great quality. It does give it that kind of ethereal stadium quality that Def Leppard has. This is without it. That reverb is really giving us a lot of front to back depth. So I think we pretty much covered most of the guitar stuff. Let's take a look at the vocals. So, like I said, we got Chris Payne on the vocals. He really did a killer job on the phrasing and the tonality. I really had no critiques about any of that stuff, which was really cool just to be able to get the vocals and kind of immediately start mixing them. So let's go ahead and just take a listen to the vocals.
I'm out of love, got a photograph, picture of.
So cool, you can tell there's quite a few effects happening. Let's go ahead and just take a listen to the vocal dry, and then I'll talk about some of the different effects I put in.
I'm out of love, got a photograph, picture of.
So the first effect that's pretty important is the double tracking. So the verses are not double tracked, but starting halfway through the verse and in the pre-chorus and in the chorus, the vocals are double tracked. So
I wanna touch, I see your face every time I dream. On every page, every magazine, so wide and free, so far from me.
Okay, cool. So that's the double track. And then the next effect would have been, this is this thing I kind of stumbled across on another song I'm doing at the moment. And I'm not going to talk about it at length in this video because it's a lot to go over and I'm going to cover it in the next video. So basically I tried to recreate an AMS DMX15 delay unit in the box by using 8 different delays that are set at very specific time values. And like I said, I don't want to go too deep into this because I'll go into it in my next video.
I'm out of love, got a photograph, picture of.
I turned it up a little bit so you could hear it better. And it looks like I did a little bit of reverb.
I'm out of love, got a photograph, picture of.
And then I had a couple of delays set up. I had an eighth note delay and a quarter note delay, both set up on my Lexicon Primetime. And these are going throughout the whole track. So we've got these two delays that are going the whole time. And then I got a couple of delays over here that only come in at very specific moments, which we'll take a look at.
I'm out of love, got a photograph, picture of. Passion killer.
What I really love about that eighth note delay is just the rhythm of it, the kind of groove that it adds to that vocal.
I'm out of love, got a photograph, picture of. Passion killer, you're too much, you're the only one I wanna touch.
That's one of the things about vocals and delay versus reverb. You can use little or no reverb, really, and just use delays, and the delays can be timed such that it kind of gives more energy and more rhythm to the vocal performance. Rather than trying to get all that wetness out of a reverb, which is just going to kind of muddy things up. And then I've got this quarter note delay that comes in just on the pre-chorus.
Oh, look what you've done to this rock and roll clown. Oh, look what you've done.
And then I had a little bit of H3000 just to, looks like it was set on the real chorus preset.
Oh, look what you've done to this rock and roll clown. Oh, look what you've done.
And then over here I've got my LV throw track. I think I've shown this before, but basically I'll put my delay on a separate empty audio track, and this allows for me to just grab a clip of the vocal in any spot where I want to have a delay throw. And it's like a super fast, super easy way to add delay throws to a song. So I literally I grabbed this lead vocal and I drug it down here, and then now you have a delay.
You've gone straight to my head.
Yeah, it's like an insanely long delay on that part. But so that's pretty much the lead vocals. We can take a look at the backups now. I don't want to break down the full backups because it's all pretty much the same as I did in the Hysteria video. What I have right here is a stereo print down of all the background vocals, and that sounds kind of like this.
Photograph.
But real quick, I'll just kind of highlight, the things I talked about in the Hysteria video that are important for this kind of sound. First of all the parts are triple tracks. So every time I had somebody record a background part, we do it 3 times. That gives it a really distinct character to the vocal. That's really important for this sound. And as you can see, there are quite a few tracks here. And so basically I had my friend Chad come in to help out on some of the background vocals. Some of you might remember him from the 5150 recreation I did. He did the lead vocals on that. So he came in and helped out on some of the BGVs. So you can see we got Chad, then there's me on quite a few of these parts. And then there's a few tracks of Chris. And he pretty much just sang the 2 kind of main parts in the background vocal. That's pretty much all I asked for him to do. He sang the 2 kind of main parts of the background vocals. And then all this other stuff was just us messing around until we ended up with something that kind of felt like the record. And it ends up being a lot of tracks. Another thing is it's all panned down the center, which is something I pointed out in the Hysteria video, which is pretty distinct, which is a pretty distinct part of the Def Leppard background vocal sound. A lot of times it is just straight up down the center if you really listen to it. And having this many layers of vocals just right on top of each other, being panned down the center like that, really gives you that huge, thick kind of sound. Very focused and very thick kind of sound. And then the last kind of important thing as far as achieving these kind of background vocals is high end. Like you can see right here, I have boosted 8K all the way. And then I took the second band right here, 7K, boosted that pretty much all the way. And then I boosted a bunch of low ends. So in effect, what we're doing is kind of taking out a lot of mid-range by boosting a lot of lows and boosting a lot of highs. I generally prefer to do my boost first. I will boost lows. If the vocal feels like it's a little bit mid-rangey, I will boost highs and I will boost lows. And a lot of times you'll be surprised at how much that will deal with whatever mid-range thing you were hearing that was bothering you. So that's usually my first step. Boost highs, boost lows, and only then, if I'm bothered by something in the mid-range, I might go look for it and try to pull it out. But in this scenario, it worked really well, just boosting a ton of highs and some lows as well. And that's a really important part of the Def Leppard background vocals sound as well. I mean, there's essentially no mid-range. It's just all highs and lows. And it's a really cool sound, you know. Let's just hear real quick what it sounds like with and without this.
Photograph.
I mean, without it, it's just like super dull and horrible sounding. So don't be afraid just to grab that treble knob and turn it up all the way. That's really a big part of some of these classic records, is just a lot of treble. I know as engineers in the digital age, a lot of us have grown kind of weary of treble because it can be so, unforgiving in the digital realm. But it's a really important part of the sound. Yeah, cool. So I think that just about covers it. So like always, drop a comment down below if you have a question or a comment about anything. And then also, if you got a song recommendation, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys want to hear. So appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.
You